I get asked this question a lot on various forums, so I thought I would do a quick video on this. Is how do you clean your suppressors? There are some, like the ones that come from Silencer Central, that are serviceable. Some are not. But these are two examples. These are both from Silencer Central. These are Varminter series. This is a version 3, a version 4. This is not called the Banish Suppressor, but it's really the same thing. The main difference between the two, they're both 9-inch suppressors, titanium, but this one can be broken down to be 7 inches versus 9, so I use some additional tools for that. But just to kind of go through the tools I use, the first problem is getting the end cap off. I hear people say, well, this design is hard, it slips when I try to do it. That's why I use an impact drill. The pressure on this, as I use this, the vibration plus the pressure opens up these end caps very easily. Otherwise, like I said, they can slip and be very difficult to take off. Once I get the end cap off, on this version, I need to take my two segments apart. I actually use 2 strap wrenches for that to separate the two different parts of the body. Then once I actually have it apart, I use our baffle removal tool. I will insert that in there. Then I will use a second wrench with a socket on here to spin this in and out. And that will then quickly remove the baffles from the inside of the system. Once I get my baffles out, I'll then use a combination of distilled water and CLR. I will put them into a baggie. And I actually use 2 in case they would leak. I then put them in my ultrasonic cleaner. And I do that because that way all the mess stays in the baggie. I have to use less distilled water and I have no mess inside of my sonic cleaner. And that is my combination of what I do to make a very arduous, tedious task pretty simple and easy to do. Now let's start and actually do this process. So we'll start by taking the end cap off. Now, I've got, I would say, between 500 and 1,000 rounds through this right now, so this is far beyond, what normally Silencer Central would say, that they would recommend as far as disassembly is concerned. But this still should be no problem. Look at that. No twisting, no nothing. Easily the end cap came off. Some people will soak the threads, etc., but there's no need if you use an impact drill itself. Okay? So now I can see the inside of this can. I don't know if you can see, but terribly filthy in there right now. So I'm going to go ahead now and break these 2 different pieces apart to allow me to go from a 9-inch down to a 7-inch. Now that I have them on here, I simply rotate. There would have been no way for me to get that off if I was trying to just use my hands. Hardest thing to remember is just make sure you're going the right direction. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. But now using 2 strap wrenches, you can hear how it just sounds terrible because of all the carbon, all the power that's in these threads. But now I have my 2 pieces disassembled. Now this is really carboned up in here, so I would have difficulty getting this out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these baffles first, then put this back on and remove the last 2 remaining baffles on this. So now how do I do this process? Like I mentioned, I'm simply using my baffle tool. I'm going to go ahead, make sure you've got the right end down here, 22 caliber versus 30. This is a 30 can. I'm going to go ahead and spin this till I start feeling the friction. And now again, if you try doing this by hand or with a wrench, that would be extremely difficult to do. By having this on here, I can simply put this on. I'm going to pause temporarily. You can see it's starting to come out of the end. I'll speed it up a little bit. And they just fell right out. There is no way without the baffle removal tool I'd have been able to get those baffles out. But just by using a combination of a socket and a baffle removal tool, I can spin those out of there very easily. So those are the 2 kind of worst parts of the process, getting the end cap off and getting the baffles off. So now that I've got these off, I can go ahead and separate them if they will. If not, I can put them straight in here. Some of these are so tightly, they're coming apart, but they're so tight I may not be able to get those off, but I can go ahead. I can put those in my baggie. You can see how dirty they are. Look at my hands and all the crap that fell out of this tube. But again, I'm not quite done. I've got all the parts from the 7-inch portion. I haven't gotten the ones out from the other portion. So I will go ahead, excuse me, go in the wrong direction there for a second, grab the wrong can. I'm going to thread this back together, and I've got those again back in here. Now I can reinsert my baffle tool to get to the rest of the portion. Connect up my socket and slowly start moving, and the other ones are going to come out as well. You can tell it's really carboned up in there because it's putting a lot of pressure on it. Again, there's no way those would have came out without the tool. And there's my final 2 baffles. Now I've got all my baffles. I'm going to go ahead and put them in my bag. I mentioned my solution. I typically am doing a solution of CLR and distilled water. So I'm going to start with my distilled water. And cover them so they're, a little more than halfway covered. My CLR. And finish my residue, or finish my solution so that all the baffles are covered. There we go. Now it's already starting to eat away at some of that powder residue, but what I'll do next is I'm going to go ahead and fill up my ultrasonic cleaner with normal water. I'm going to place the bag in here, and I'm going to run it through as many cycles as I need to make sure these come out squeaky clean. The baffles are done being cleaned. Talk about a difference. Now they're nice and shiny. Pretty much like brand new. I wish I had discovered this process right away. It would have made cleanings a lot easier. Now, a couple other tips. Eventually, after you do this a couple of times, you're going to need more than just to clean the baffles. You're going to have to actually clean the suppressor itself. Now, but eventually get buildup in here and you won't be able to put the baffles back in. So in order to do that, or to clean that, what I do is I either get a 5/8 inch threaded bolt and put it in here, or this is a 5/8 size plug. And I'll simply plug the end, and then again I'll use my combination of distilled water and CLR. I'll put it in here, use a nylon brush and work it around in there, empty it out, and then go ahead and probably use like a towel like this and a cleaning rod and put it in here and dry it out and get the rest of the residue out here. But that'll make it nice and clean inside so you're able to put the baffles back in successfully. Now, that's kind of the last topic to talk about today, is putting the baffles back in. Okay, now on these Silencer Central suppressors, they have a little key in here so you can see how they all slide together. Then I put my finger in the end and I put them into the tube all as one piece. And then I rotate it, and when you get it in the right spot, you'll actually feel that it can no longer move. So that key fits into a slot inside, that keyway inside of the actual silencer itself. That's what syncs everything together, and that's how you know you're in the right spot. Once I'm done to putting my baffles in, I just have to put my end cap back on. Now, it doesn't have to be super, super tight. You just want to make sure the O-ring is no longer visible. So I don't use my impact driver like I did to get it off. I don't use that to put it back on. I actually use a tool that came with it. And in most cases, probably hand tight is good enough. And in this case it is. The O-ring is gone. If you want to, I could cinch it up just a little bit tighter to make sure. But now my suppressor is ready for action. One last thing is, once you have everything together, if you move your can and you hear any kind of movement at all in there, you did something wrong. Something wasn't put together right. So I would disassemble and put it back together again.